Deborah was very upset. She and her husband had been married for 8 years, but they were still unable to have children. For a long time, she feared that Pedro would leave her and find a new family. However, years passed, and Pedro remained a faithful husband, still loving and caring for her as before, treasuring her, and never giving her a reason to doubt his sincerity. Deborah cried with happiness, thanking her husband for this, and he only smiled at her words. There, my girl. I love you, I really do." The couple often talked about adopting a child, but they could never bring themselves to make the final decision, especially since their acquaintances only shook their heads. "It's very hard to raise someone else's child. You never know what you'll get or what kind of heredity they have," said their friend Barbara. "Remember Laura? She adopted a child, and what do you think? He turned her life into a living hell. He turned out to be disobedient, mean, and just awful. She had to return him to the orphanage. The whole story was a nightmare for everyone, including the boy." Deborah shook her head. "Well, I don't know how you could take a child and then turn them back in. I couldn't do that, and it's not like that for everyone. Many people live quite well with adopted children. The children are grateful for being adopted, and the parents are happy that they got such great kids." "I don't know. That sounds more like a fairy tale," Barbara said skeptically. "You should consider IVF instead." "We not only considered it, but we also found out about every detail of it. But you have no idea how much it costs, and the chance of success isn't 100%. Where would we get that kind of money?" "But what if you do have your own child?" Barbara added hesitantly. 8 years without a child, and now you think one will suddenly appear? Who's believing in fairy tales now? "Listen, Deborah," Pedro finally said to his wife. "I really did dream of adopting a child, but I've changed my mind. I don't want you to be all anxious about it, so let's just let things happen as they will. Let's just drop the subject for now." Deborah nodded, and although she was very upset, she didn't argue with her husband. A few weeks passed. One day, as Deborah was returning home from work, she saw children beating someone on a playground near their house. She immediately rushed over and saw from a distance a girl of about 5 years old. She was lying on the ground, trying to protect herself from the kicks and blows. "What are you doing, you little brats? Stop it right now," Deborah shouted. Seeing Deborah, the kids scattered away, while the little girl remained lying on the ground, wiping away her tears, streaming down her cheeks with dirty fists. Deborah helped her up, brushing off her old, worn-out dress. "Why are they bullying you?" she asked the girl. "I came to play on the swing. I thought no one was here. They saw me and said I was dirty, that I was bringing lice here, and that I shouldn't come back. The little brats. If I see them again, I'll definitely deal with them." Deborah bent down to the girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sharon," the girl sobbed. "And where's your mom, Sharon?" "I don't have a mom. I live with my grandma. She's very old. I have a dad, but he stopped coming a while ago." The girl suddenly burst into tears. Now, little one. Does it hurt?" Deborah looked at the scrapes on the girl's knees and the bruise on her cheek. "No, it's just that my grandma will scold me for messing up my dress. I don't have another dress, and Grandma will be mad." "All right, Sharon, come with me. There's a store nearby where we can buy you some clothes. Are you hungry?" "Very." "Good, then I'll feed you two, and then I'll take you home." Deborah took her time. Pedro was away on a business trip and wouldn't be back for a few more days, so she decided to take care of the girl. She spent several hours with her, then took her to her grandmother. Mary turned out to be a short, thin old lady with a stern look. "Who is this you've brought?" She snapped at Sharon from the doorway. "This is Aunt Deborah. She's very kind. She protected me from the bullies, bought me clothes, and fed me. Look." The girl handed the old lady a bag with clothes, a pair of pants, a couple of t-shirts, 2 skirts, and some shoes. "What the hell do you want?" Mary Sergeevna turned sharply to Deborah. "She has no one in this town but me." Then why aren't you taking proper care of the girl? Her father, my nephew, brought her to me. He said it was just for a short time, but it's been several months now. Short time, my ass. She's being bullied, and you let her go outside at this age, Deborah began to explain. Sharon is also hungry. Are you aware of that? And who are you to tell me how to handle the girl? The old woman retorted. Who do you think you are barging in here? I don't remember asking you for help, Miss Goody. Two Shoes, acting all high and mighty. Get off my property. Now! How dare you speak to me like that? Deborah was outraged. I'll report you to Child Services. Report all you want. The sooner they take her away, the better. I've got my own troubles, and now I've got this freeloader on my hands. Shocked, Deborah left for home, saying goodbye to Sharon and promising to meet her in the same place the next day. The girl smiled and nodded. For almost 3 months, Deborah and Sharon met every day. Deborah fed the girl, took her to the zoo, and bought her small toys. But she was wary of telling Pedro about her attachment to the unfortunate child. When she finally did, he just shook his head. She has a father and a grandmother. She's not exactly an orphan. Oh, Pedro, she's so miserable. And what kind of father is it who leaves his child with a distant relative and then disappears God knows where? He never comes to see her. How can you treat a child like that? The girl has no mother. She's so lonely, and her grandmother is mistreating her too. Deborah sniffled and then suddenly started talking hurriedly again. Pedro, please let me bring her here. You'll meet her, and I'm sure you'll like her. We can't adopt her, my dear, Pedro sighed. Why are you torturing yourself, Deborah? I don't know. Deborah shrugged. I've grown so attached to her. Listen, why don't you just meet her? We'll go together tomorrow evening. You're free tomorrow evening, right? Pick me up from work and we'll visit Sharon. You two will become friends, I promise. All right, Pedro agreed, feeling sorry for Deborah. The next day, they went to meet Sharon, but the girl didn't show up. Sensing something was wrong, Deborah went to her home. Mary met her with a sour look. What do you want now? Call Sharon. She's not here. What do you mean she's not here? Where is she? Her father came this morning and took her. He finally showed up. Deborah's arms dropped limply, and she started to cry as she walked away. Pedro, seeing his wife's tears, tried to comfort her, saying they should be happy that the girl was reunited with her father. But Deborah felt a heavy weight in her heart that she couldn't just shake off. Months passed, autumn ended, and winter arrived. One day, Pedro, returning from another business trip, stopped at a roadside cafe for a bite to eat and a hot cup of tea. Suddenly, he saw a girl pressing her face against the window, peeking into the cafe. Pedro initially thought the girl was looking for someone she knew, but when he looked more closely, he realized she was simply hungry and couldn't take her eyes off the food. He beckoned to the girl, and she immediately came inside. She looked terrible, thin, wearing an old coat that didn't seem to provide any warmth, and torn, worn-out shoes that didn't fit her. She looked like she had stepped out of a painting of homeless, destitute children from the 1920s. On her head was a gray, downy scarf, heavily worn and matted in places. "Get out of here!" the woman behind the counter shouted. The girl flinched and backed toward the door, but Pedro intervened. "What are you hollering for? I invited her in because I want to feed her. What difference does it make to you? I'll be paying for her meal after all. That's more business for you." The shopkeeper calmed down and shrugged, but continued to grumble about beggars for a while. "Are you very hungry?" Pedro asked the girl. "Choose whatever you like." She nodded, and he placed an order. While she ate, Pedro went to the counter to pay and to ask the shopkeeper about the girl. "Is she an orphan?" "Kind of. I think her name's Sharon. Her father was a drinker, not quite an alcoholic, but he would go on a binge now and then. He worked at a nearby tire shop, but recently he got hit by a car and died instantly. Didn't even have time to react, like. His wife kicked the girl out right after the funeral. Why would she want a daughter? So now the girl's been begging. But don't worry, we've already reported her, and the child welfare authorities will be coming soon to take her away." Pedro turned around and looked at the unfortunate child. "Where do they live?" the shopkeeper explained. When the girl finished eating, Pedro took her by the hand and went with her to her home. The stepmother, seeing her stepdaughter with a stranger, was initially frightened, but then, realizing the man wasn't an authority figure, not a policeman or anything like that, grew bold and started yelling at Pedro. "Please, lady, be quiet," Pedro asked. He also called out to a neighbor who had come out to see what the commotion was about. "Please come over. My name is Pedro. Here is my address and phone number in case the child welfare authorities come looking for the girl. My wife and I will take Sharon with us and try to adopt her. From what I see, she's not wanted here anyway." "That's good," the neighbor nodded. "It's about time. This poor child has suffered enough. Sharon's mother was a good woman, not like this Miranda, but she was very sick and frail. Her husband was drunk every day. She died before her time." Sharon's stepmother pursed her lips at this remark. "Mind your own business, Diana," she snapped, and then turned to Pedro. "If you are going to do what you say you are going to do, go ahead and take her. I have plenty of work to do without her." "Well then, give me the documents for Sharon," Pedro said, nodding. When the woman retreated into the house, Pedro heard the neighbor's words. "Take the girl, young man, and give me your address. That nasty old woman is ruining the girl." Sharon looked at Pedro with wide eyes, unable to believe her luck. Could it be that he wanted to be her dad? A real dad? The girl suddenly burst into tears and clung to him. Pedro felt his heart flutter, picked the girl up in his arms, and walked to his car. Deborah saw her husband pull up and hurried to meet him. But then she stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth to stifle a cry that escaped her chest. "Sharon! My Sharon!" she cried out, running to the girl with open arms, and Sharon ran to meet her. "Mom! Mom! Deborah! My mommy!" The astonished Pedro watched them and couldn't believe his eyes. Could this really be the Sharon his wife had grown so fond of? But how? How could this have happened? Deborah looked at her husband with shining eyes, and Pedro smiled at her. "Well, now we have a child. 2. Now we will have 2 children. I'm pregnant, Pedro." "My God, Deborah, my dear, is it true?" Pedro kissed his wife, then embraced both of them. "My lovely girls, I'll do everything for you. Just be happy, and then I'll be happy too." Embracing, the family went home, where warmth, comfort, and love awaited them. 5 years passed. Pedro and Deborah's family lived happily in their cozy home. Sharon grew into a beautiful, intelligent 10-year-old girl. She excelled at school and enjoyed drawing. Her younger brother Harvey, who was now 4 years old, adored his older sister and followed her everywhere. Pedro and Deborah had officially adopted Sharon, and the girl finally had a real family. She called them Mom and Dad, and they loved her as their own daughter. One summer, the family was on vacation at the sea. Sharon and Harvey were happily splashing in the waves, while Pedro and Deborah watched them from the shore. "You know, Deborah," Pedro said thoughtfully, "I sometimes think about the day I found Sharon. It was a real miracle." Deborah smiled and took her husband's hand. "Yes, fate brought us together. I am so grateful for our family." At that moment, their wet, happy children ran up to them. "Mom! Dad, come swim with us!" Sharon called out cheerfully. The parents exchanged glances and, laughing, ran after the children to the water. Waves rolled onto the shore as the happy family enjoyed a warm summer day, full of love and care for each other. In the evening, when the children were already asleep, Pedro and Deborah sat on the veranda, gazing at the stars. "You know, I'm so glad we decided to adopt Sharon back then," Pedro said quietly. "She has brought us so much joy." Deborah nodded. "And Harvey, too. Our children are real treasures." They sat in silence for a while, enjoying the quiet and each other's presence. "Do you remember how scared we were that we wouldn't manage?" Deborah asked. "Yes, it was frightening. but love helped us overcome all the difficulties," Pedro replied. He hugged his wife, and they continued to sit together, dreaming about the future of their family. Ahead of them lay many more happy days, filled with love, care, and the warmth of family life.